Check, check. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? It's okay. You don't have to yell with food in your mouth. I get that. Welcome to the second of three series conversations on scarcity mentality. We're going to get into that in a minute. My name is Greg Carroll. I'm the president of the board of Kansas City Jazz Alive, and I want to thank you all for being here. So give yourselves a big round of applause. COVID can't keep us down. We're back in person. So a little bit of housekeeping before we begin today's session. Restrooms, as I understand, are downstairs. To your right once you go down. Okay. There's also an elevator here if you need access to that as well. We want to thank our friends here at the Folly Theater, Rick and Stephanie, are they here? And Lee's here. Let's give our Folly Theater folks a big round of applause. Thank you. I am curious, are there any first timers here at this session? We've got a few. Wow. So a little bit of orientation. So what is KC Jazz Alive? So KC Jazz Alive is an organization that was founded by 4 groups about 10 years ago to try to bring together the jazz community by way of sort of, we like to use the mantra, raising the ship or raising the tide that lifts all jazz boats in Kansas City. So at that time, I was at the American Jazz Museum. John McGraw was with Buttonwood Financial Group and Buttonwood Art Space. Steve Hargrave, who's here in the Red Hatter, was with Jazz Ambassadors, and then Pam Hyder Johnson was elder statesman of Kansas City Jazz. By the way, I'm using the mic not because you need me to use it, but because we're streaming today. So everything is going out live to Facebook. So we also want hello to all of our friends on Facebook. So anyhow, Jazz Alive came together when these 4 organizations said, we need to work to get together to try to sort of empower and serve as a catalyst organization to bring all the different entities within the Kansas City jazz scene together. Sort of a microized version of a project I used to be part of called the International Association for Jazz Education. Sort of a micro version of that. We need to provide for all these entities to plug in. So the name Jazz Alive, A-L-I-V-E, A meaning awareness. We want to bring awareness to the community. L meaning we want to be a listening body to the community. I meaning we want to share an integration of ideas that creates programming or supportive programming. V, we want to serve as a voice to the community. And then E, we want to provide exposure. Exposure not just to artists or venue people, but to students, to educators, and of course, enthusiasts. That's sort of our sector base, if you will. So Jazz Alive formed. We formed a board of directors. At the time, it was the 4 of us. We expanded that, and now we're up to a board of 7. And I want to thank and welcome, have you give a big applause to all of our board members, those that are here. Gail Tallis, retired exec here with the Folly Theater. DJ Jansen, who's here now with H&R Block and great Barry sax player. Emily Behrmann, who you're going to meet on the panel, is on our board now, retired executive with Midwest Trust Center. John McGraw, I'm sure he'll be flying in real soon, and Chris Burnett, who's with the Burnett Music Foundation, great saxophonist as well, and then of course yours truly. So we are expanding our board. Our mission calls, our bylaws call to expand our board as many as I think 11 or 14. Is that right, Steve? So we have room. So if any of you I think you might be interested in serving in a great organization, we'd certainly love to have you. So we're going through a vetting process. Just get in touch with any one of us. So Jazz Alive has a number of programs. This little flyer that's kind of somewhere around on your table sort of just summarize what I just said about our organization. Then we also have a couple of other little flyers that I've tried to do my lack of marketing skills here. One is a project called the Jazz Heritage Series. The Jazz Heritage Series is something we're going to be doing. And the idea is that we think it's great to get people out into the public, get them to businesses, get them to social groups, get them to schools, performance, to talk about the richness of Kansas City jazz, and to do it in a way that all exposes them to great things about Kansas City jazz, either through performers that we bring, artists that speak about it, educators that speak about it and can perform, but also there's a great exhibit that we have, and that's one of the other flyers. That's the exhibit called the Jazz Legacy, KC Jazz Legacy. That exhibit is a fantastic piece. I don't have mine. So whatever that piece is, can I borrow yours? Thank you. You'll see we have 2 exemplars from the exhibit flying today. So the exhibit is 17 panels of many of the significant pioneers of Kansas City jazz, both past and today. Now, our current model has been we're acknowledging and paying respect to those who have passed on. So we've added a couple of new people to our exhibit. The latest addition is the great Everett Devan, who's now on our exhibition. In our exhibition, of course, Ahmad Al-Adin. There's so many great people. Ben Kennard, Charlie Parker, Benny Moulton, Jay McShann, of course, the great Mary Lou Williams, and there's 17 people. We want to see this exhibit at your place of employment or at your school or at your work, whatever. We'd love to see this exhibit. It's very inexpensive. We make it that way because it's part of our mission to make the music accessible. So if that exhibit excites you and you want to have that or something about the Jazz Heritage Series come to you, give us a call. I think there's information on here that who you can contact and get information about it. In terms of another flagship event that we do, we kind of got away when we first started on doing a lot of events because we didn't want to compete with other jazz entities and presenting entities that were doing jazz related events. So we shifted our focus to mainly being an organization that's about advocacy, that's about support, that's about marketing or promoting. So we used to have an event called Charlie Parker Celebration, in which we presented and literally self-produced about 22 events over like a 14-day period. And of course, aside from it darn near killing us, right, Steve? We decided let's go to a spotlight Charlie Parker, where what we're doing is we're working in partnership with jazz venues like John Scott's venues to partner with the artists that are performing, asking them to give some tribute to Charlie Parker during the week of celebration. And we'll do our part by promoting your performance that day and getting people to that venue. So Spotlight Charlie Parker does that. We have a couple of flagship events that we do within that. And if you go to our website that's on the screen, spotlightcharlieparker.org, you can peruse through and get a sense of what we do. The other handout that's in your packet is a 8.5 by 11 sheet folded, gives you a little bit more statistical information about the demographics of people that we serve in Spotlight Charlie Parker. And these are the numbers that reflect last year's Spotlight Charlie Parker. So feel free to check that out. And if you have any questions, feel free to call us. So with that, I'm so excited that you're all here today. And thank you to our panelists. Let's welcome our panelists. Very quiet group, huh? So I'm going to introduce them in a minute, but I want to just set the framework for what the session's all about. This session is drawing on a theme that we're employing here. And Chris Burnett and I had a chance to talk a few months ago and come up with what is the theme that we think makes sense, that we can have a number of sessions sort of focus on. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Stephen Covey, the great educator, author, a keynote speaker, historian. Anyhow, he wrote a great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And part of that piece, he talks about this concept called scarcity mentality versus abundance mentality. Now, what is that? Scarcity mentality is the zero-sum paradigm of life. People with a scarcity mentality have a very difficult time sharing recognition and credit, power, or profit, even with those who help in the production. They also have a very hard time being genuinely happy for the successes of other people, even and sometimes especially members of their own family or close friends and associates. Conversely, abundance mentality flows out of a deep inner sense of personal worth and security. It's the paradigm that there is plenty out there and enough to spare for everybody. It results in sharing of prestige, of recognition, of profits, of decision-making. It opens up possibilities, options, alternatives, and creativity. So Chris and Chris uses this analogy. I love it. It's the scarcity mentality is thinking of a pie with limited pieces, and we all don't have enough. But abundance mentality is thinking that there's a lot of pies to go around, and we all should have a piece. So with that, we said, okay, let's do 3 sessions. So the first session we talked about was the Kansas City jazz ecosystem within the light of the notion scarcity mentality versus abundance mentality. And we had a great panel discussion that really had some great conversations. So today's session is the second in a series of 3 sessions focusing on scarcity mentality versus abundance mentality in jazz. Our first session was fantastic, resulting in some very compelling discussion and exchanges among the panel and attending audience. We will continue the theme with a keen focus on viable economic opportunities. So today is about economic opportunities. And by the way, one of our last panelists, Mike Gherkin, is here. Mike, raise your hand. There's Mike back there. Mike did a great job on that panel. And Mike had a great handout in that panel, and he brought some extra copies today. So if you'd like one, I'll be happy to float a few around. I'll give some to our panelists here in case y'all want to look as well. And then I'll have these float around. You're welcome to take one. So I want to introduce the panel. I'm very, very happy to introduce you to a gentleman immediately on my left here, John Scott. Someone certainly doesn't need any introduction. He's the proprietor and the owner of Green Lady Lounge. There's a great venue downstairs. What do you call that venue?
Just the lower level.
The lower level?
The Orion Room.
The Orion Room, that's right. And then he has the Black Dolphin. John has done a great job of employing a lot of Kansas City jazz artists. Let's please welcome John Scott. The gentleman to John's left, your right, is Clarence Smith, who certainly also needs no introduction. He's an educator of note here in Kansas City and also a fantastic drummer and a really great friend from Penn Valley, from the MCC-Penn Valley Community College. Please welcome Mr. Clarence Smith. The wonderful young lady to Clarence's left and your right is Angela Ward, who represents some of the best of artists in Kansas City. I love the work that Angela does, a great piano player and also a really fantastic teacher. I love how she engages with young people and a dear friend. I had an opportunity to record with the James Ward band when I first came to Kansas City. And when I was on a trip in the Pacific Northwest, I had somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, I heard you on this project with this band called the James Ward Band." I thought, wow, so they have press. Please welcome Angela Ward. And the very nice lady to her left and your right is Emily Behrmann. If you've all probably, again, don't need an introduction for this person. She's done some yeoman's work at Johnson County Community College for what, 28? How many years? 30 years. I was trying to carve a couple off there for you, Emily, but she's really been the voice and the face of the Midwest Trust Center, formerly known as the Carlson Center at Johnson County Community College. Please, and now a board member. We're so happy to have her on our board. Please welcome Emily Behrmann. And I know he's not on the panel, but the gentleman just walking in is Chris Burnett, our board member, marketing director. Okay. All right. So with that, Oh, by the way, today's session is being streamed live on Facebook, and we want to thank Kristen Neuroth. Where's Kristen? Raise your hand, Kristen. He's back there, supported by Bill Mullen. So thank you for Kristen, your work through Deed Media, and Bill Mullen for his support of that financial support. All right. So I want to turn to the panel and ask you to think about the term scarcity mentality versus abundance mentality. And ask you, so how does Stephen Covey's theory resonate with you in the context of the Kansas City jazz scene? I'll just open that up. I'm not going to ask anybody individually, just have you open it up, and please use your microphones because we are on Facebook. So please, if anybody would like to chime in. Don't be shy.
I am very shy, can't you tell? First of all, I live life with a glass half full, number one. And so I definitely believe that there's a place for all of us to make a living in this music, number one. And it takes a lot of different things to make that happen. It takes a lot of hustle. It takes cooperation, communication, but I can just look at myself as an example. There's so many layers to all this of what defines whether or not we're being successful this way. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of those things. But generally speaking, I think we can make it happen in this town.
So I want to just sort of ask John. I know you've been sort of real busy, and your pulse on the jazz scene in Kansas City has been fantastic with the work you've done to engage so many artists. Thinking about scarcity mentality, where we kind of fight and scrap, versus abundance, where we kind of support and create and share and love. How does that resonate with you? Do you see that there's a lot of that, or is there some scratchiness that ought not to be so scratchy? Can you use the mic, by the way? There you go.
Some of the people on that list were some of the scrappiest, scarcity-minded folks, and they had good reason to think that way. Depression era people who grew up in times where there was real scarcity with regard to food and opportunity and finances and so forth. You see these people, they're not philosophically, glowing and open. You know what I mean? They can be pretty harsh. I'm going to use a name, Everett Devan. You remember him? One of the most wonderful. I'm blessed that man was still making music. He was able to influence Ken Lovern, Chris Hazelton, any number of other fantastic organ musicians. But from my perspective, he was a lot like kind of my grandpa, my grandma. The Depression era, they were the children of Depression era people. And so they knew what it was like to be plugging along full of, hope and aspirations, and then just have everything taken away. So there's a kind of a balance between scarcity, limited resources, and how to allocate those. And then there are periods of abundance that are obvious. I'm just talking about in the economic, because that's the focus today, the economic realm. And it's important to kind of know where you are and what exactly you're talking about being scarce and being abundant. Love is always abundant. We make that. Money isn't always right there. It's not always obvious. We can imagine and philosophize the idea that it's going to come to us if only we open our heart and be positive, and that can have a lot of value. But there's also a kind of naivete that is obvious there, and a foolishness that is there, and that alone, that intention, can precede the manifestation of
abundance, right?
And you certainly won't get it there if you're scrapping and fighting and think tomorrow's going to be worse than today, but there's going to be a balance between scarcity and abundance. And if you want more musicians to exist, we need to figure out on the grounds how to make more jobs for those musicians. And it's also fair to say, do we want everybody to be a musician? You know, these are all good questions. At least. I'll leave it there.
No, that's a really great response, John. I think that, so as I hear you speak about the importance of sort of taking that notion contextually, scarcity versus abundance, and putting it not only in an economic vibe, but also in terms of how musicians had to exercise parts, one or the other, in terms of their survivalship, of being able to deal, being able to handle. I would be curious, as a musician yourself, Angela, in terms of the work that you've done, not only through the James Ward Big Band, but the other projects that you do. How do you see that notion in what you do and how you live and how you operate?
I can only speak from my experience, and from what I mean, I've been very blessed, knock on wood, to have an abundance of gig opportunities. And however, my colleagues, I may have colleagues who have not been so blessed, or who don't have the work that they think they should have. I try to encourage them not to look at the next person and say, how are they getting gigs? How are they, you know, if you approach it that way, you will be in that rut for a while. But whenever I have an opportunity to pass a gig along to another musician who may not have as much work and really deserve it, I do that. I recommend gigs to other musicians a lot.
And that's a perfect exemplar of abundance thinking, of how we can do what we do as we coexist where we do, to be supportive of others, to help them do what they do, right? So I just applaud you for that kind of thinking and sort of passing the love on, if you will, passing the opportunities on. So Emily, I want to pass the mic to you and ask you to think about it from the context of being a presenter in your observations of scarcity versus abundance, and how maybe you tried to play a role in what you did to help either mitigate some of the scarcity mentality by providing abundant stuff. I know a perfect example is the Winterlude events, but can you speak to that from your lens?
Sure. So I do want to make it clear, I did retire. So in case anybody's wondering.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
speaking,
I thought I said
yeah.
retired. My
No,
bad.
I think you did, but anyway, so I'm just drawing on my past experience at this point. But yeah, the Winterlude is an example of something that Johnson County Community College has programmed for about 15 years now. And Doreen Morandi, as you probably know, is instrumental in making those events happen and still is. But I think the location of the college being out west as it is, hopefully what the college was able to do with those events is not only provide more opportunities for musicians to perform, but also to acquaint an audience in Johnson County with the art form that maybe they weren't very familiar with. And of course, the college also presents nationally touring artists and people from all over the world. So people coming to our venue that, I'm still saying people coming to the college's venues to see those national artists may be more familiar with them than they are their own backyard with people that play right here. So that was what Winterlude hopefully is continuing to help provide. And so in that way, making sure that people in our audience, enthusiasts, know that there is a rich jazz community here from a performance standpoint, and that it's something that they need to seek out and look for and try to engage with on a regular basis. And I think, looking at Mike's handout from last time, what I love about one of the points he made here was components of jazz are intentional listening, collaboration, creativity, improvisation. So I think in the community, as far as being presenters, as far as being supporters, part of that is also collaborating to provide information about how do we engage with jazz here in Kansas City. And that's a big important part of it, promotion and putting funds toward those events as well.
Beautiful, well stated. And I think that the whole notion of promoting and supporting is also about abundance, because if we're all helping an artist to have success, I think they're going to get a nod from a venue owner to come play again if there's butts and seats at their gig, right? They're going to love to have you come back. So whatever we can do to help support that, I think just has an abundance kind of allure to it, if you will. So let's talk about economic pathways now, since John has told me this is all about economy, and he's absolutely right. This is about economic pieces. I'd be curious to get your take in terms of economic pathways for KC artists from your perspective, and we'll start with you, Clarence. From your perspective, what does the scene offer musicians and venues for that matter? So what does the jazz scene offer up musicians in Kansas City?
To me, a plethora of opportunities for musicians. And, there's a huge list starting from performance. And if we just go down that road, there are many different types of performances. Just depends on if the artist wants to do that. If there's a country gig and it pays well, are you going to do that gig? Or are you going to be a jazz guy? So that's one avenue. And as an educator, there are just a lot of opportunities with education.
Yeah.
Beyond that, well, can I circle back to education
Sure,
again?
absolutely.
And just share an experience of mine that I experience on gigs sometimes, and it just has to do with the mentality of the artist, and that is when I first went to college, I didn't want to be an educator. I wanted to play. I wanted to gig. No, I didn't know what that looked like, but to me, that was success as a musician and not as an educator. And people would say, well, what's your major? And I would say music education. And they'd say,
so you can't play.
That's a hindrance. Yeah. Yeah. That's a robot. That means that's what you're going to kind of end up. And I did end up being an educator, but my point is at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes in Kansas City, when you're tearing down your drums and everybody is unloading and they're tired and it's raining outside. I've had a gazillion guys say, Smith, I should have done that ed degree. And there are a lot of other reasons that we could talk about, but the importance of being able to, as an artist, the importance of being able to be open to all kinds of different ways to do this. And it's tough, but I think you have to decide for yourself what success is. I said that earlier, or what happiness is, I suppose. But I do think that there are tons of opportunities to make this happen. You just have to mature. I think that was part of it. You have to grow up at some point, and you can be the Grammy winner up here, not Grammy Award winner, but I know her son earned some Grammy Awards not too long ago. So, but does it look like, you're going to play on TV, you're going to be on records, you're going to sell millions of records, or are you going to be a local person and be happy and make a living, and everything in between? Yeah, but
that's great.
Yeah,
go ahead. Finish.
But just getting back to it, I think I see it happening. I'm looking at guys that I respect and are great musicians, and to me, they're making it happen. Unless I know something else, I'm just not sure. I know there are folks out there struggling and trying to figure it out, but I think that's just where they are in their lives.
So I'm hearing you say, Clarence, that the scene offers musicians diversification opportunities in terms of how they deploy their talents.
Absolutely.
You can diversify, be an educator, you can diversify on the stage, but also to some points that I've heard BJ Jansen talk about, which is fantastic. sometimes people forget about the technology assets that are available for commerce development. And we're going to get into that. That's a question too. Hopefully you'll chime in too, BJ, but very good that you
All
brought
of
up
that.
education. So stakes in the ground. We got some stakes in the ground, right? I would just be curious. I'm just curious. There's a lot of encyclopedias up here. I would just be curious if anybody can just chime in and say, can you quantify how many jobs for jazz musicians are available in Kansas City? And it's kind of a loaded question. And I know it's an open question, but it isn't. Does anybody have any idea? Just taking a guess, how many jobs are available for jazz musicians in Kansas City?
I can't give you a number,
Mhm.
but I am learning that the younger musicians are very creative when it comes to creating opportunities for themselves to create a better economic pathway for
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
They are creating content. They have songwriting studios where the young people, I try to get in there, but they're writing music and then pitching it to Grammy Award winners, and they are actually doing it
Mhm.
and making a living that way. So not only is performing a way to make money here, you can also produce,
Mhm.
work in the studio, and there are so many education. It's endless
Mhm.
how much you can do in the area of education. I have a colleague who's reaching out to just randomly, because she's that type of person, randomly reaching out to band directors and asking them, can she come do a concert? Can she come in and work with the youth or work with the students there? So that's another opportunity.
Yeah.
We're going to be giving concerts in Kansas, in the Kansas School District next month. So we have like 4 concerts lined up.
Beautiful.
So there's so many opportunities.
So when I hear you talk about that, it reminds me of when my days of teaching jazz, directing jazz studies at CU Boulder. I used to have a jazz pedagogy class with mostly graduate students that were in this class. And back then, everybody's dream was to go to New York and chase the train. Y'all know what I mean by that phrase, chase the train. Damn it, I'm going to be the next freaking John Coltrane. I'm going to be the next freaking, Joe Lovano. I'm going to be the next Joe Henderson, whatever, right? And I would say to these guys, I said, okay, you realize that by doing that, you're going to limit yourself on the number of opportunities that you'll have financially. Well, but the only way you can make it in jazz is to go to New York. I said, You know how many great musicians are out there that are very noted jazz musicians that live in Hoboken, New Jersey, or that live in some rural area, Minnesota, but they travel all over the world? I said, so if you're dispatched into a city with no jazz scene, make a scene. And they look at me and they say, what do you mean by make a scene? Exactly what you guys have been talking about. Being creative in how you deploy your talents, dispatch your talents, because all of those have 3 registers. It was the great trumpet player Freddie Hubbard told us once in a clinic that remember your instrument has 3 registers. It has the low register, it has the high register, and it has the cash register. And he meant that, right? Anybody else? Pathways, thoughts about pathways? What does the scene afford musicians, or what does the scene afford venues? Anybody want to chime in?
Well, I was going to say, this is, as you said, it's kind of a loaded question, right? So I
Very
feel like
loaded.
the number of opportunities for musicians in jazz in Kansas City equals those number of musicians times however many ways they want to make
Do
it
what
work
they
for
do.
them. Yeah.
Right.
So if they're producing their friends, if they're recording their own stuff, if they're going venue to venue, doing gigs, multiple times a week, that's what it takes, basically. And I think from a presenter's perspective, from a supporter's perspective, the jazz scene here is so packed with opportunities to to be a part of that, to engage with it, that I feel like that promotional piece, again, just helps shore up those things that people are out there hustling and trying to make happen. When you
Right.
have people there to see it and hear it, that's just going to create even more, hopefully.
Yeah. Very good. KC Jazz Alive was approached by ArtsKC to look at a new study of, and this is the loaded part of the question, and that is a study that deals with the economic impact of the arts. There was a study done by the Americans for the Arts, probably what, Cheryl, what was this, about 15 years ago, maybe 12 years ago? The Americans for the Arts did that study, the economic engine piece for the arts. And they do it regularly, but they first came out with it about a dozen years ago or so, whenever that was. When they came out with that, it was very impactful for a lot of us in the arts. And I remember back then talking with Harlan Brownlee, who was running the ArtsKC then, about how important it would be to have that piece done at a genre base. So in other words, to really distill that down, I'd like to know what the impact of jazz is, what the impact of opera is. And I know which his name, who was running the opera, wanted to know that. You remember his name, Cheryl?
Evan.
Ward. Yeah. Little guy. and the symphonic orchestra, all of them wanted to know. And so thank goodness now they're beginning to work with an organization called Sound Diplomacy, which is going to be doing some studies with arts organizations and mostly performing arts organizations, that we can now begin to look at answering that question. What is our economic impact? Now, I could tell you that when I was at the museum, we had 1,500 jazz performances a year. And Emily can tell you she had X amount per year. And Clarence could tell you at his school, he did X amount of performances. You can add all that together and kind of answer the question. But to Angela's point, which I think is even the point I was trying to dig for, is that it's astronomically higher depending on everybody's creative thinking ability. Does that make sense? If you think that the only way you can make money in Kansas City is by performing on a stage, then you are limiting yourself on your opportunities. So I'm encouraging people to think even beyond the stage. Think about the stage because that's important, but think even beyond that. So I'm wondering, in terms about jobs or relevant pathways in this era of the Kansas City jazz scene that are not currently being exploited, what are there some jobs or opportunities that you guys can think of that maybe are available that we don't know about or folks aren't taking advantage of, that could perhaps play into the whole notion of economic pathways for artists? There's a thinker. I did send him these questions yesterday. It's a good question, huh? Is there anybody out there? Yes, sir. Video games? Expand on that a little bit.
Video games filled with music. Some of it's jazz, some of it's rock, some of it's just depends on the game. So producing music that fits that model.
Mhm.
And I don't have to do it, but Ryan Davis, Kadesh Flow. Cartoons and animated films and all of that. Another, you don't have to be everything.
Has everybody heard of the concept Muzak? Has everybody heard of that concept? You know, when you go in an elevator, you close the doors, you hear this music, right? Well, that music has to be purchased by that organization, that corporation or whoever, right? And they have a big partnership, of course, with Sound Exchange, but ASCAP and BMW, listen to me, BMI. They may have a partnership with BMW because they may own them, but I don't know. Yeah, right. What kind of checks you getting, Greg? My point is that Muzak is another opportunity. So I remember not only when I was at the museum, but particularly when I was with the IAJ, a lot of people requested us to set them up with certain artists that could write jingles for a movie or write some themes that the people like John Williams would take and build into soundtracks. They were looking for that creativeness, if you will. Again, to your point, Angela. Clarence, what do you think?
I think there's a lot of room in with music technology still.
Mhm.
And if you notice, a lot of universities now are offering those degrees where they didn't 5 years ago. And it's, there's tons of students knocking on the door waiting to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious. I want to stay on this thread a little bit about employment pathways. So the question posed was, what other non-performance opportunities? Well, let me pose the question. Are there other non-performance opportunities that could be, aside from gigs and concert performances in KC? In other words, are folks taking advantage of technology-driven opportunities? What are some opportunities you might suggest that musicians explore? What about opportunities in education, which you've already touched on a little bit? What about opportunities in production and arts presenting? So anybody want to speak to any one of those sort of three areas in terms of opportunities that maybe we could explore that we haven't? John, looks like you're reaching for the mic. You have some ideas?
No, I was putting it down here, but let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to.
Sure, circle back, do whatever
If you
you
don't
need.
mind, I'm going to redirect just a smidgen here to put in context the way that I feel like sometimes their music supporters, all of you people are rabid music supporters. Okay. You guys are, from my way of thinking, I would put it, you're emotionally invested in the success of, no matter what, you're believers.
Mhm.
I'm an atheist.
Mhm.
Okay. I like to, and not literally like I don't believe in God or whatever that is.
Lightning was going to strike.
Right. I'm holding on to you. The drummer. They always explode in the movies. And
Why is that?
sometimes it's good to have an atheist run in the church. You know what I mean? Not all churches, but one. Because the believer might just believe themselves into bankruptcy. Okay. Or they get in their minds about some particular thing that they think God said, and they're saying it, and the congregation is not responding. And pretty soon there's nobody there. Nobody's donating. The church goes out of business. The atheist may say, hey, let's temper that a little bit. Maybe try to appeal to people, because I know you believe all this stuff, but we also got to keep the doors open. Okay. So there is scarcity and there's abundance. These are both things. They're both legitimate. They're angels. There are devils. Okay. And the devils think the angels got it wrong, and the angels think the devils got it wrong. So both of those sides are important. Let's think about where the money's coming from. We have very different businesses operating here. Some businesses are operating on the merit as assessed by people who have lots of choices where to spend their money. So a tavern owner is going to be different than some other things. Think about, when you're talking about these different opportunities, think about, where are you putting money into this system? Okay, where's the money coming from? Is it coming from the public in general? And why are they giving you money? Is it because they want to, or is it because they feel somehow obligated to do it? Just consider that. And those are very different conversations. You're going to do different things. The incentives are different. That's very important.
Yeah, and John, that's really a good point, and part of the discussion that we're going to undertake in session 3, where we really talk about wrapping all of this up, but doing it in a way that provides us context. Well, how can Jazz Alive as a Catalyst organization take some of these nuggets and ideas that we've been talking about in the last 2 sessions and roll them into action? Chris, would you add anything to that? Is that kind of what we had been talking about?
Well, I think John said it's there, types of income streams. It's great having a diversity on the panel, perspective of people actually doing things. I think John personally, he cracked the code for a successful jazz. He knows the supplement, but I think one of the best that are out there, he employs the most. There's jazz there 365 days a year. And there's multiple cats working. There are cats I know that's their gig, and they go up right from the radio. They do a great job. But the thing that we are trying to get to is, how do we make just a bed for our population, our demographic of musicians, artists, population. How do we make it a thriving, more thriving place where someone that graduates from the conservatory, they don't, and after 3 years of frustration of not getting enough gigs, they're back.
Right.
Steve.
Yeah, like Steve Lambert.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that cat should be playing every night. somewhere.
Exactly.
I mean, and how do we take what these panelists are giving us and formulate something, working with industry, like we got a meeting with Visit Casey, talking with them, how do we get those type of opportunities, the diversity of opportunities that someone, yeah, I'm not gonna play my saxophone every night, I'm gonna sit here and write on these days, and then I'm gonna interact with this business and help support tourism, but the airport can play or something like this.
Mhm.
And there's enough, I honestly believe there's enough work for everyone if we think really collectively like they're doing right now, and with I like the word synergy. And
Think abundantly. Mhm. Mhm.
What I mean by synergy is everyone doing what they do, but it's the same flow.
Right.
The same, you're pulling the same direction. And it's great having really putting a lot of people work in a venue. I think that we could have other venues imitating elements of what John Scott does, and to a degree that's appropriate to them. Like he was saying, different the tavern owners going to have something different to consider.
Right.
In every one of his venues, he's considered something different. Black Dolphin is different than.
Then Green Lady. Right. Right.
That's all I would be quiet.
No, great feedback. John, you want to add anything to that? Steve? Oh, Steve, yeah.
How much of any lack of creativity that we're talking about here is to be laid at the feet of the musician, the venue owner? Where is the lack of creativity?
Can I answer a bit of that? One, not every musician, when put to work, is going to be good at that job. There's probably a reason. It's not because everybody's bad. Everybody was bad, and so he became an HBA. There's good reason he decided to do that. We need everyone to have the opportunity to succeed and to fail. That's the autonomy. You can't prop everybody up. Oh, you're screwing up, and this is very vital. You can't do the easy things right. Yeah, you can run,
Right.
but there's easy things that you're not doing that other people who do have that job have done. So
Yeah.
people have got to be able to fail. That's part of this system. It doesn't mean we beat them up and call them names.
Which is part of the notion of scarcity versus abundance. You can accept people's choices to do something or not to do something based on their ability level and still be an abundant thinker in terms of how you support each other. And that's the kind of juice I was hoping that we would get at. So thank you for bringing that up, and same with you, Chris.
And we need more jazz clubs. So if
Yes.
I'm not, that would be scarcity. Like no other clubs. No, I want to be the Las Vegas of jazz clubs. Like
Right.
people are coming here to go from club to club to club, and mine's one of those clubs. And it's my job to be the best club in the best scene in the world.
Yes.
That's what I want. I want a lot of clubs, and I want people to run their damn clubs so they can stay in business. There's
Hello.
nothing that makes me madder than somebody coming in and say, I'm a jazz club. And then 5 years later, they're out of business. Now, God forbid I be out of business, right? In 6
Right.
months. But that's my fault if I do. I want more successful, kick-ass jazz clubs in
Man.
the city. And I don't have to own all of them.
Amen, brother. Clarence. Yeah.
Clarence, a question really quick.
Hang on 1 second. We're going to open up for questions in a minute, but Clarence, take up on that.
Well, yeah, I just would like to, as an educator, I think, we play a role in that. I know when I was a student back in the 1980s, no one talked to us about business or being an entrepreneur. No one did. I remember gigging with some people. Well, yeah, I guess you could call it gigging with some people who you won't know who this guy is. Harvey Phillips was an outstanding tuba instructor.
Tuba guy.
There you go.
Harvey.
And I met several of his students, and those dudes, when they graduated, they knew how to start a business. They knew how to market themselves. And that's something my percussion, I was just trying to get through a senior recital. I mean, I wasn't concerned about some of those things. And I think we've we've improved in that area. And I think part of it's mental. You know, you have these great, you know, you have these very talented students, and they graduate or they travel, they go somewhere, and they're not doing what they set out to do or what they think they need to do. But I think I have a response, all of us that are educators have a responsibility of counseling them and providing them with information. Like, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
You know, if you don't play at Carnegie Hall at age 23, you know, there's a process. There's maturing and aging, and sometimes you got to do the HVAC thing sometimes, but I think we have to make that so it's okay, and, and not put a negative stigma on not necessarily, you know, hitting the goal right out of school.
No, that's
very important.
Both Clarence and John, those are two really, really good pieces of feedback for us to chew on in terms of how do we support, how do we encourage, how do we, what's the word, really juice someone's ability to do something, and how do we help them redirect if the direction they're going in isn't quite working for them, without being God damn it, you got to do this because you suck at that. That's not abundance kind of thinking. Versus, hey, Jim, have you thought about this? You know, there's really a cool thing, and I think you would be great for it. See what I mean? It's all about love. Okay, we're going to open up for a few questions. I had one more question here. You guys have some good questions, so let's go ahead and open it up. Start with you, Chris. I think you had something else you wanted to share.
Basically, I was just going to ask, it wasn't a clear answer on what the dynamic is like now. I noticed 20 years on the scene here working with musicians. I saw a generation graduate from conservatory 2 or 3 years, and that reality.
The bit of because of the
well, saying is that expectation of the young person that the Bobby Watson or a Carl, that's their ticket to success. And then reality, John talks about the realities of give them a chance to fail. That's true. But when you come out into an infrastructure that there is nothing, and you think you've been listening to records, watching movies, and taking courses and talking to legends that come into your school, and you think that's the reality, and then you get out and the real reality hits you in the face, I just think there should be some balance in that. I think that at the onset of recruiting, and that's what we try to do with Youth Jazz, but at the onset of recruiting, that reality, like Clarence was saying, like he was talking about the example of the professor, the exemplar of the professor who was training his students as they were going through the curriculum of the course. Right. I think that we could do a better job of that, and all of the other ideas for making a that have been stated here, expose those people to that. I do production music as well. I've been doing that ever since I have a Weather Channel when they used to do that, when you could submit. But the way I found that out was like a trade secret. It was like I had to knock 3 times and turn around 5 times, and then someone told me exactly. But I think that's a there's those opportunities out there. And then you can create those with businesses. Here in Kansas City, you can create those opportunities by going and saying, hey, I notice you have commercials. I music. I'm from Kansas City. And they'll say, oh, okay, what do you charge for that? And you look up on BMI and they'll give you the rates for that kind of licensing. And that's an income stream. Like, I'm making money sitting here, you know, in that sense. We all could do that. Right. But we have to teach our
and
that's
that teaching can come from all of us. It doesn't just have to come from the educator. It can come from the artist, the guy who's the leader of the band working the other 3. It can come from the presenter. It can come from the jazz venue owner. It can come from us as the patrons, right? So it doesn't have to just be the art or the educator. So what's your name? What did you guys say? Sorry about the microphone, guys.
No, it's fine. I can just, I just wanted to, it's for John's point of other coming and going. And you owners support each in that way? Like when you see something about to tank, do people step in and help?
I'm sorry. Can you hear him okay? Okay, go ahead. All right. Go ahead. Just curious how that goes.
Broadway Jazz Club, you remember that?
Yep.
Jen was involved in trying to help with that too. When I say help, it's not because I've got so much money. I'm just running around, John Hammonding everything, I don't have to work for a living, and God bless him, right? It was awesome, but okay. But that's complicated.
Yeah, right.
Again, I wanted another jazz club because again, my goal is to be the best jazz club because I want it to be. Everybody should want to be the best at whatever they're doing. I want to be the best jazz club, whatever, and they have lots of different kinds of jazz clubs. So when Broadway came along, they were already built. They had an alcoholic complete. I mean, I'm an alcoholic for God's sakes, probably, but this guy, and I'm just going to say it out loud here, operating it into the ground, then borrowed more money, brought two perfectly wonderful human beings into it. They blew more money. Then their accountant stole money from them. All this was coming along, just spending just unrealistic business model. Nobody asked, these people didn't ask the other jazz owners or club owners or stuff how to do it first. And I don't blame them. That's perfectly fine. But it was too late by the time you get in there and then you discover another $250,000 that they're in debt. Then it's like, Jesus, you got to get out of this.
Yeah.
Let's keep it running until we can sell it to somebody else, Yeah. And that's what happened. Other clubs, they pop up, they've already built it. They're not using duct tape. They're building it for real. They're not changing anything. If there's a mistake in the way the bar's laid out, it's too late. They're going to sunk cost ride that thing into the ground. So it's not typical that bar owners, and we're generally pirate ship captains kind of mentality, small business owners, scrappy, doing it our own way. That's why we're doing this. We don't tend to talk to each other. I have tried to talk to people, and there's some people we have a kind of a relationship with, but it's natural that people get a little unnerved when if they think of you as competition, come and they want to share information. I have come to believe, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. If you're in a knife fight and you're going, no, we should just get along, and you're getting stabbed, and that's stupid. So there's a balance,
John, I remember I'm gonna commend you because when you first started to build the concept of Green Lady, you remember you called me and I came over and we started visiting. Now I was the CEO at the American Jazz Museum, which also meant the Blue Jazz Club in the Gym Theater. And you gave me a tour and you said, this is what I envision. This is what I envision. And our conversation was all about, great, this is fantastic. I can't wait till it opens. Some people may not be as open-minded about that, but the fact that you reached out, so important, because as Chris said, you've built a model that has cracked the code and you figured it out. And you've got jazz musicians playing in there every day of the week, every day of the year in 3 venues. Now that's something to be proud of. Imagine if we had 20 John Scott kind of venues in Kansas City, maybe a little different flair, some of them, right? But you've got that mix, as he said, as he alluded to, where now you have an abundance of stuff that's affording people opportunities. Yes, sir.
I studied a little bit of marketing. You talk about fast food places.
Yeah.
These McDonald's, they all build the same places. People will drive to that area to go get the fast food.
Right.
To what extent would the jazz benefit from a district or certain places where they be close together? Or does it matter?
You just said jazz district.
Yeah.
Right? There is.
Well, we have a jazz district and and even take that, let's expand that more to a jazz city. Now, I don't know if does anybody get the Kansas City Business Journal? They just did an article. I don't know if you guys read this article, but go to KCBJ and read the article on Kansas City Jazz. Basically, they're saying we need to reconnect with Kansas City Jazz. That's a perfect example of abundance thinking. In fact, Jazz Alive is looking at how can we create an article like this in a column that we send out regularly to various broadcast or published media, right? Because it was so well written. It was so well written, and she nailed it. She said, here's the great history, here's the great present, here's what we need to do in the future. And when she's saying we, she wasn't saying the artists suck or the venue owners suck. She was saying, guess who sucks, guys? We, the patrons. We ain't getting out and supporting this. But she didn't do it in a negative way. It was it's hard to put words into that, Chris, BJ, I don't know if you have a thought on that, but that whole idea is very important. And that sort of speaks to what you've been talking about and what you also alluded to, Clarence.
The patrons don't suck.
No, they don't. No, I know. I was being colorful. That's not literal.
Any business, including Disney, that goes and beats up their fans
Are going to go out of business.
They should go out to business unless they're getting subsidized to maintain that viewpoint.
Right.
If they lose money, they will change their behavior and provide what the people want.
That's right.
That's important. Again, you are able to fail. You're able to suffer from your wrong-mindedness. If you're preaching, again, from the pulpit, a notion that the masses don't care about.
And no one's coming to church.
How to get them to care about it.
Right. You can't church the unchurched if you don't have them in the church.
Exactly.
Right? Does that make sense? Did that kind of answer your question about, I see where you're going with, okay, there's franchise models, there's stuff.
Some of the other owners that maybe aren't thinking this way would be educated to say, just like in fast food, more clubs just grow the whole business and everybody benefits.
Right.
Then more people get used to going to clubs and acquainted with the
I want
Beautiful.
20 clubs on Grand, but that is not going to happen because the Crossroads Association is not going to allow
I
that.
wasn't saying they need to be in
Well,
one space. I'm thinking the whole, like you said,
The whole city, right?
Because everybody drives 20, 30 minutes all the time.
Right.
Places.
Well,
So they don't have to be in one place. I'm just saying that the owners that aren't already in this mindset might be educated to say, look, it's benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Rise and tide.
Yeah. Marilyn, did you have a thought? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think one of you did. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jerry McAvoy from the Charlie Parker Foundation.
Yes. Hi, Jerry.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
I just haven't been here, so please be easy on me here. But I basically say jazz is jazz in Des Moines. Jazz in Kansas City is heritage.
Hello.
Totally different.
Hello.
And then heritage is what our kids need and what our tourism needs.
Hello.
Most of the money should go into tourism. That's everything about Kansas City has to do that. But we've got to create something to show them.
Hello. Hello.
But we're going to try to come out with some old recordings that haven't been heard before.
Yes.
Start the effort there.
Hello, Jerry. That thinking of what you just said there is what drove us to create the exhibition.
Okay. Yeah.
That's heritage on heritage traveling. What also that thinking is, I know I'm not the panelist here, but y'all know me, shit. Greg ain't shy. I was contacted by the new KC Arts Terminal when they were going through the design of that. They hired 5 of us to become art consultants for the terminal. And they asked me to be part of that team of 5 artists, and they were all visual artists. I was the only performing artist in that team. No, there was another one. Penny, the one that plays violin. What's her? Yeah.
McBrien.
Yeah. Aaron was in there. So they asked us to be part of this, and we were staunch about making sure that terminal shared the narrative of Kansas City's heritage. that it wasn't just another airport that looks like, if you could take it and pick it up and put it in Denver, it looks the same, or take it and pick it up and put it in St. Louis, it looks the same, or go to Paris, it looks the same. It's got beautiful artwork, real esoteric, abstract art and all that, but you got to have the heritage from this region. And so we looked at what those are, and believe it or not, jazz is not the only heritage thing in Kansas City. Y'all know that, right? Okay. So there's a lot of stuff about Native people here. There's a lot of stuff about agriculture here. And so you're going to see that reflected in the airport. Now, where I was really pounding the desk was, I said, I want to make sure people hear jazz in that airport. I want them to hear the music, because our best narrative, our best piece of book is what comes through a speaker. And so I want people to come into that terminal, and I want them to hear jazz. I want them to get off that plane, and I want them to hear jazz. So my hope is that they listen to us, and you're going to see, as part of some of the exhibits, I think even one of the exhibits turns into a stage. So there's going to be some really cool stuff out at the Kansas City Airport Terminal. So if you get a chance to go there when it opens, it's going to be fantastic. That kind of thinking is about bringing the heritage to the conversation, making sure they understand the great legacy that Kansas City jazz has. Other questions?
Can I just jump
Yes.
in real
Oh,
quick
yes,
with that?
yes, Emily.
So total agreement on the heritage of jazz in Kansas City. I mean, I think everybody in this room gets that. I think that we can't stop there,
Exactly.
because the young musicians in Kansas City right now that I'm hearing are doing things that are groundbreaking. It's different. It's what the art form needs in order to grow and in order to thrive. So I think we
Yes.
can't get too stuck, although that is our history,
Yes.
in where we came from, because we also need to look at the future and where we're going and present that too. And people that come to our city want to hear Charlie Parker's music. They want to hear where we came from, Count Basie and all of these great
Right.
legacy artists. But they need to hear what the new young people are doing, because that's what's going to be the future of what we're going to do here.
Amen. And I want to ask Angela this question to kind of piggyback on that a little bit. When I hear your son, Jalen, I mean, her son, Jalen, plays the drums. He's tearing it up. I mean, he's killing it. He's bringing that kind of spirit to the music. But I would say that also, when he does that, he's paying respect to this lady and to that man. You can hear it through what our African friends call the Njinji, his essence. What do you think? Talk about that a little bit from your perspective.
Oh my, first I wanted to thank you, because now I know why I will be playing at the grand opening of the airport terminal. But thank you for that. Glad you said that. Now I know who to thank. So, Jalen is founded a group, the DJ Quartet is Dugan Smith, Jalen Ward, Isaiah Petrie, and Jordan Fought. So the four of them perform original music that they created themselves, and it's like nothing I have ever heard in my life. They rehearse at my house, and I get to hear this wonderful magical music throughout the day. They gave a concert last night, and there were 7 people there. They gave a concert last month. There were 7 people there. No, 3 people. Yeah, me and Isaiah's parents. So, and they're just tearing it up. Like the room is full. And
Except for of people.
yes.
The room is full of music.
The room is full of music, and they are performing like they are at Carnegie Hall.
Right.
And they could care less that there's no audience. It's shocking to see that the young people these days, they are interested in the music. They are not concerned about any drama or anything like that these days. They are concerned about creating great music. They're going to produce their first CD, is going to be released on the 25th, and they're just full steaming ahead.
Yeah.
And myself and the other young man's parents are like, they don't care that, no one's here. They're just playing along,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I'm inspired by their motivation, and they don't let anything stop them. They just keep going. They did a show in St. Louis, and I can't remember the name of the club, but it was packed, and they absolutely loved them. I don't know
Yeah.
how they advertised, but I don't think they're not doing the best advertising, but they're just, they did a tour last year where they drove from here all the way up to Indiana, and every city in between, they stopped and gave a show.
Well,
So
yeah. So Angela, I would say to you first, I'm glad to hear that. And to also to Emily's point, the importance of innovation, of going out there, going for it. Help us help them. Help us help them, because I think that whole, I don't care if people aren't here, that they'll grow out of that, as you all know, especially as mortgage payments come due, right, Ken? That shit'll grow old really quick. So we need to help us help them, so that audiences can be there to support their craft, not to try to direct their craft, but to support their craft. I think that's really important. So with that, boy, I tell you what, this has been a great panel. I want us to think, everybody, about Cheryl, you had one more quick question. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely unimportant, I guarantee you.
I don't think anything John Scott has said up here ain't important. So I want us to think about the next session in terms of what we're going to do moving ahead. And I want us to think about, as we brainstorm some possibilities that could bring jazz music as both an art and commerce into the 21st century social fabric and larger economy of Kansas City. Let me put that on your heads, okay, on your minds a little bit. And then come back, stay tuned for the location announcement of where we'll be in March to continue this discussion. It's so great that COVID has allowed us to reconnect in person. This is our largest attendance since post-COVID, so thank you for that. We want to get back to higher numbers. Please bring a friend or two with you the next time. And I want to also do a shout out and thank Chris Burnett for helping to be the architect for this scarcity and abundance mentality session. As we mentioned, it's so important to thank Stephanie and Rick and the folks at the Folly Theater. Want to thank, of course, the board. Yes, let's give them some love. We want to thank, this requires funding to be able to do this. So we want to thank the folks at the NTDF, ArtsKC, the Muriel, McBrien, Kauffman Family Foundation, and the Missouri Arts Council for their financial support. So let's give them some love, guys. And I don't know if you all know this, but we're now putting an apparatus in place. We have a development finance committee, which Emily chairs, and we're now starting to ask you for money. And so we've put an appeal out there that has already generated at least $3,000. We have a call. We have a call to match the board gifts. The board has totally given $10,000 collectively. And so we're asking you to help us get to that goal so that we can help to do the kinds of programming that we're planning to do into the next year. So look for information about the March session. Thank you all very, very, very much for being here. And let's thank our panelists, Emily Behrmann, Angela Ward, Clarence Smith, and John Scott. Thank you all very much.